siddhi hum hum. Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munish Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum. Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum. Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum. Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum. Pakyuke Kudan Dagelu Pakyuke Sundan Dagenga Tudan Dageye Tünyerme Çıktı Çingelo Makyuke Kudan Dagelu Makyuke Sundan Dagenga Makyuke Tudan Dageye Tünyerme Çıktı Çingelo Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Sashipuki Choshimeto Chamare Rabalingashin Nidegempadi Sange Shinto Mikte Ulvarki Drokunanam Dashingla Chopar Shoyidamang Guru Ratna Mindrala Kamniryatayami Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho. Nel Buddha, nel Dharma e nel Sangha prendo rifugio fino all'illuminazione. Con la pratica della generosità e delle altre perfezioni possa io ottenere lo stato di Buddha per il beneficio di tutti gli esseri senzienti. in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge unto enlightenment through the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Namo Laike Da Ludan Jinke Drubundanda Mike Namdam Drowa Kunge Dranama Chitsampa Tamcheke to Dagi Chutento Tamcheke to Dagi Chutento. Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Ognuno di noi,
Each one of us,
nel momento presente,
in the present moment,
volendo o meno,
whether we want it or not, we are strongly conditioned
dal nostro passato.
by our own past.
Noi facciamo una fatica
We
enorme
have a tremendous difficulty in living the present in a way that it's independent from the past. Actually, we're not even able to do that.
quindi per il quanto che il presente si
So,
dimostri
for as much as the present can
esperienze che abbiamo vissuto
appear in a different way from some experiences that we lived in the past, we still have the tendency of projecting in the present what we lived in the past and imagining in the future as a consequence.
Uno degli aspetti
And
difficili
one
è
of the
proprio quello di
difficult
cambiare
aspects
queste abitudini.
is really
Noi dobbiamo ripetere certe esperienze
that
più
of
volte.
changing these habits. We need to repeat experiences many times.
È esattamente quello che succede con
It's
Sampo, no?
really just what is happening with Sampo.
E questo cagnolino
This
che
little
è
dog
arrivato da me,
that
che è stato
arrived to
abbandonato,
me that was abandoned
ha tanti traumi, quindi ha
has
paura di
so many traumas, so he is
per il
afraid of
quanto che il
everything.
presente sia
So,
diverso del
and for as
passato,
much as the present is different from the past that he lived, it's
e quello che
still
succede
is
in
blocked
questo
there.
momento
So,
vuole salire
in this
perché
moment,
si sente
he wants to
protetto,
get
immagino io,
up
almeno cosa sente lui,
because if he feels protected, I imagine.
però allo stesso
But at the
tempo
same time,
non permette di essere aiutato.
he doesn't allow
Quindi vai
me
lì,
to
cerchi
help
di
him.
prenderlo,
So you try to
ma
catch him,
prenderlo.
he doesn't get caught.
E questo è un po' quello che facciamo un po' noi
And
anche.
this is just what we are doing
Noi da
also.
un lato
We, on one hand,
vogliamo
want
Noi da un lato vogliamo uscire
on one hand, we want to get out of some dynamics.
Da un lato noi vogliamo uscire da certe dinamiche, da un altro lato
But on the other hand, we are afraid.
abbiamo paura di
We are afraid
in qualche modo
of
svincolarci
somehow
dal nostro passato. Abbiamo paura di poter
unbinding ourselves from our past,
vivere le cose
of
in modo
living
diverso.
things in a different way very often.
E quindi esiste questo
And
lavoro
so there is
necessario
this
di permetterci
work that
nel momento
that it's necessary to
presente
allow ourselves
un'esperienza diversa per piano
to
piano
live a different
permetterci
experience
di
in the present moment,
vincolarci
to bit by bit allow ourselves
quelli
to
che possiamo chiamare traumi,
unbind
in
ourselves
modi
from our
diversi, comunque
traumas
condizionamenti
or
che man mano ci siamo
anyways
creati nel tempo.
conditionings that we created during time.
Io vedo questo su tante cose. Ci sono tanti
And I see
aspetti della
this
nostra vita,
on many aspects of our
cose che noi
lives,
sappiamo che ci
things
fanno
that
bene, però
we
allo
know
stesso
that
tempo noi
are
non
good for
riusciamo
us, but at the same
veramente
time we're not
a
really able
farle.
to do
Cose che
them,
sappiamo che ci fanno
things
male,
that
ma
we know
non le
that they are
abbandoniamo del
bad for
tutto.
us, but we don't abandon them completely. And there is a place where one of the things that is really fundamental in order to get out of the dynamics in which we find ourselves is our capacity of trust, our capacity of actually relying upon a path, trusting on a goal where we want to get to. That is what we call also taking refuge. Taking refuge is not just saying, please help me, or maybe I just do a ceremony. It's an act where one really not only says but believes deeply of getting out of a certain dynamic, getting out of a certain reality, relying upon
affidandosi a chi ci guida,
who guides us, relying upon a path, and to one's own capacity of being able to do that, and trusting the goal that one wants to reach. And sometimes we have this dynamic where the problem seems less, there seems to be less suffering in that rather than the solution. To change a habit is difficult. To change paradigm is difficult.
And in the
practice of the self-healing, we started to see a little bit the analogy of the mandala. That is one of the representations. Actually, all these mandalas that we see here are like sort of maps representing a meditative path.
Prima o poi riusciremo. E la prima parte, noi quando vediamo il mandala,
and the first part, when we look at the mandala, it's surrounded by these barriers. Actually, they also represent mountains, these fires that are around these barriers, that represent partly that in order to get into this reality, because the mandala also represents an universe, a paradigm, represents the creation of a reality. The first thing, we need to go beyond some obstacles, and two of the main ones in our path.
Eccoci, ce l'abbiamo fatta. Ci sono due principali ostacoli che noi abbiamo nel nostro percorso. Il primo ostacolo
The first one is our own selfishness.
Questa visione nella quale
this view where
la priorità è l'io e il mio.
The priority is the I and the mine.
Dove ogni cosa viene vissuto in funzione.
Everything is lived in function of my needs, but also not so much of more of my wishes, my needs. The fact that I want to be happy, I want to have pleasure, and it's always a priority what I think, what I want.
E un po' mi fa venire in mente un amico.
Makes me think of a friend here of the center that many years ago was taking care of coordinating the various volunteers at the center many years ago, and he is a person that is used to work and doing, not really chatting and talking, and he is one that is able can do like outdoor jobs very well. But what was really tiring for him was that, okay, we are many people, but everyone has like a second me. According to me, we need to change the tree. We need to move a tree. Okay, according to me, we need to do it like this. According to me, we need to do it like that. And the reality is that there are many systems that work, but we need to choose one and do it together. And we spend a lot of time talking about the according to me instead of doing it.
No, Buddha ha descritto l'essere.
And Buddha described the being
vengono chiamati
with five aspects, called the five aggregates. This is a note that we will come very handy later. We have the body and mind. The body is represented by the white Vairocana, which is the aggregate of form, and the four other Dhyani Buddhas represent the mind. Mind is divided in four aspects. We have the mental continuum, which is the mind itself, which is represented by the blue akshobhya, by the heart. And then we have the sensations, represented by yellow, Ratnasambhava, the discernment, Amitabha, red, and the compositional factors by the green Amoghasiddhi.
Per capire questo,
In
ieri
order to understand this, yesterday or the other day we talked about lasagna.
quando noi guardiamo una
And
lasagna,
when we look at a lasagna, there is like the lasagna, right? But then there are also all the ingredients. The lasagna doesn't exist independently by all the flour, by the tomato, by the cheese, the oil, everything that makes the lasagna. These are the compositional factors. There is the mind, which is the lasagna, and then there are all the ingredients which make out the mind, which are called the compositional factors. And inside of these compositional factors, two of the main ingredients are sensations and discernment. And here, it's not the time to get into the details, but there is a very beautiful study of this called the 51 mental factors, where you study the different components of mind. So you have discernment, contact, attention, intention, the 11 virtuous factors, 6 negative root factors, 20 secondary virtuous factors, and so on. But the thing where I want to get to is that Buddha Shakyamuni, when he described the being, he said that we have an identity that is based on these so-called 5 aggregates. So the aggregate of form, of sensation, discernment, of the consciousness, and of the compositional factors. And here there is a question that is asked in some philosophical texts, but why should the being be described with 5 aggregates and not with 3? Why? Because sensation and discernment are compositional factors. They are ingredients that make out the mind. So why is it not enough just to say body, mind, and factors of the mind? Could you also say body and mind?
La risposta che viene data.
The answer that is given is that one is important for us, the comprehension that our mind is not like a solid thing, but is made out of many aspects. And among these aspects, those to which we usually have more attachment, and those that through this attachment create conflicts and problems in life for us, is attachment to sensations and to discernment. If we check, the majority of the things that we do are either because we want the sensation of pleasure and we don't want the sensation of suffering. And when one is able a little bit to overcome the attachment to sensation, there is still the attachment to the according to me, my view, my idea, my religion, my this and that, which is the discernment.
E quindi la prima barriera
And so the first barrier that we find ourselves to face is our own paradigm, which is strongly conditioned by this obsession to self-gratification, where it's my sensations, my discernment, what I think, what I want, when I want it, and so on, where we give a very big level of importance to sensations, and the sensations somehow lie. Why? Why do they trick us? Because when we look at sensations, we have a view that is very much more short-term rather than mid-term.
Sviluppiamo molto attaccamento.
Develop a lot of attachment to something, to eating something that is nice, that is tasty, and so that generates a pleasant feeling, aside of the fact whether it's good for us or not. We want some things that in the immediate moment make us feel well, whether on the mid or long term they are good for us or not. Before, when we stopped a little bit at the break, I was upstairs and I was at the toilet, and then I looked outside of the window and I saw a scene that it's not a critical comment against anyone, of course, but it's a bit like, for me, it was like a representation partly of what we are all living. There were some people walking outside, everything nice, and I counted like 10 people, and of them, like 8 were at the phone, doing something with the phone. And it's something that in the immediate moment brings like relief, sometimes brings like pleasure, there are many things. But in the mid-long term, where are we going? And so our attachment to sensations often brings us to this view that it's a view that is illusory of pleasure and real well-being. It's something that is just in the immediate, that doesn't really think about our own real well-being. So the first barrier that we need to overcome to get into this mandala, to get into the mandala of the 5 Dhyana Buddhas, of the practice of the self-feeling, is the barrier of the love towards oneself, of loving oneself in a coherent way. The barrier of a great challenge that we find ourselves to face and that is not obvious at all to overcome. That is the challenge of giving priority to what is good for us, despite of what we like. Then when there are the things that we like and that are also good for us, that's even better. But there are those things that are good for us and we don't like, and we need to learn to cultivate them. And then there are those that are bad for us and we like them, and we need to learn how to abandon them. And this is a great challenge that we have, because very often we give priority to the immediate well-being. And so this is a first challenge to overcome. And when we do the practice, if we look, first we start with the breathing, and it's not written because it's not like you need to read anything, you need to breathe. And then, why do we start with the breath? To bring our attention to the present moment, to take ourselves out of that state of constant distraction where our mind is going in all directions and is not able to simply stay. Because if we're not able to stay, it's a bit like saying, okay, let's imagine that we get on a horse. Before starting a path or a journey with that horse, first we need to learn to have control over the horse, or at least to have a level which is the evolved control of the horse, where you don't even need like the reins and you can go in the same directions and you have like total harmony with the horse. When I was a kid, I really liked to go on a horse, and I remember those moments after a while when that connection was created, and then at a certain point you also wanted to just drop the reins and anyway you could go wherever you wanted to go together. But I also had many experiences of being on a horse that wanted to go right and I wanted to go left and the other way around. And that's where you need to be able to hold well to then give the direction. Before leaving for a journey by car, then you need to learn how to drive. If you don't have control over your tool, over your vehicle, then you will not be able to get where you want to go. I think this is very clear, right? And what is our vehicle? Body and mind. In this moment, we don't have a real control over our body and mind. Our body and mind, very often, we are not able to direct them in a way that it's aware towards what we want. And these breathing exercises are, first of all, to help us to get back to a place where we can direct our mind, take the reins in our hands. In the teachings of Vajrayana Buddhism, body and mind are described like the horse, and the night, where the body is the horse and the mind is the night, with the detail that the night cannot walk and the horse is blind. So the horse cannot go in a place without the night giving him a direction, but the night cannot go to any place if the horse doesn't want to get there. So the mind cannot go where the body cannot bring her, but the body cannot go, is not able to go to direct itself if the mind doesn't give it direction. And sometimes we are in this state where we lack harmony among the two. Coherence lacks. And this is the first necessary step, that of bringing our attention to the present moment, creating, I want to say like a total harmony, but like a minimum of harmony, of balance. And this we do it at the beginning with the breathing. There are many different techniques. The more one has a balanced state, the less one needs to spend time breathing at the beginning of the practice. The more one is in a state of agitation and the mind is not able to stop, the more one needs to spend time to breathe at the beginning.
Una volta che abbiamo fatto questa parte,
once we've done this part of the exercise of breathing, then we start with the part of loving ourselves. We see that in front of us we have this mountain that we need to overcome, this obstacle that is, first of all, the obstacle of immature selfishness, like an unhealthy selfishness that needs to be transformed in a healthy selfishness that is transformed in a mature selfishness that then can be transformed in altruism. Because unhealthy selfishness is the selfishness that wants to be happy, not suffer, but at the same time I increase the suffering and I don't increase the happiness. If we look at the world around us, also our own lives, predominantly we find a reality where everyone wants to be happy, but the things that we do don't go in the direction of a real well-being. It's interesting how both in the micro and in the macro, and here I don't want to open like this subject, otherwise we just stay just on this. But also when we talk about the macro, we as human beings, I'm not talking about living beings, I'm talking about human beings, very often the important decisions that have an impact on the majority of us are taken giving priority to the individual illusory well-being of power, of wealth and so on, and not to the collective well-being.
È la stessa cosa nel micro che facciamo noi.
And it's the same thing that we do in our micro, doing some things, giving priority to some things that generate an immediate pleasure, but that then generate a greater harm in the long term, rather than giving priority to what is good for us. And one classic example is eating. And then we can open many others.
Nella pratica,
so in the practice before doing the taking of refuge, after having sat down with concentration, having done the part of the breathing, having taken the presence to the present moment and the mind to a state of calmness and balance, we visualize in front of us what is the representation of what we would like to become. And then when we talk about the image of Buddha, it's not a matter, because we're Buddhists and this and that. Actually, here is a representation, the embodiment of a state of peace, of balance. The word Buddha itself means who was able to overcome completely one's own blockages and to develop one's own qualities to their maximum potential and consequently eliminate all the mental defilements and to reach a durable state of peace and well-being. So when we talk about a Buddha, we talk about someone that represents that. Buddha has two meanings. On one hand, means like who guides me, who teaches me, that can bless me, and on the other hand is a mirror that shows me one tomorrow, what can I become, which is not about the aspect, the external aspect, but the qualities, like we give a shape to the qualities. So I visualize Guru Buddha in front of me, representing all the qualities developed to their maximum potential, presenting what I can reach, and then I look back at me, inside of me, and I ask myself, me, what do I actually want? Because the first necessary question in order to be able to get out of a certain paradigm, to overcome this first obstacle, is to ask oneself, me, at the end, what do I want? What is my priority? I want to create a reality and a world that is comfortable, that matches as much as possible to what I want and to avoid what I don't want? Or do I want to reach a state, an inner state of balance, of peace that allows me to be well with myself and the others, wherever I am, whoever I'm with? And so one looks at oneself and gets to the conclusion that as long as there will be mental defilements, ignorance, selfishness, anger, attachment, dissatisfaction, and so on, as long as there will be actions made out of this, inevitably there will be suffering, and I cannot do it anymore. I want by all means to get out of this unhealthy dynamic. I want to become like Guru Buddha. I want to reach a state of peace, balance, love. I want to be in harmony with myself and the others. And in order to do that, I need a path. It's not like something, because the only resource that allows me to reach that is the fact that my being is interdependent and is transformed according to interactions. And so I need to interact in a healthy way, but by myself I cannot do it, because as some studies say, it was like 98, 99%, I don't remember, but anyway, more than 90% of our thoughts are repetitions of previous thoughts.
Siamo noiosi.
We are boring.
E cosa succede se noi
What happens if we remain in a context where we don't have interactions with something outside? And we always remain interacting like in a closed circuit. Our tendency is to just remain there, to repeat the same dynamics, doing the same thing.
Invece, quando noi andiamo a interagire con qualcosa di diverso,
and when we interact with something that is different, that gets out of our usual dynamics, that allows us to get out of those cycles and to begin to act in a different way. And that's for this reason that we need someone with whom we can interact, that helps us to see what we are not able to see by ourselves, that helps us to act in a different way from that we are used to. That's where we take refuge in the Guru, in the Buddha. When we take refuge, there is the refuge of the cause and of the result. The refuge of the cause is, I take refuge in Guru Buddha, please help me, guide me, because I want to get out of this cycle of suffering. I take refuge in the Buddha of the result. I take refuge in the Buddha that I will become one day, in my own potential of reaching that state. So it's not just like trusting, relying upon someone, do it for me. No, I rely upon you so that you can guide me, so that I can walk this path. But the reality is that we, as of today, we rely very often fully on wealth, on sensorial pleasures, to power. We take refuge fully in an idealized image of how the world and things should be.
E dobbiamo mollare il colpo
We
su quello.
should let that go.
Prendo rifugio nel Buddha,
And so I take refuge in the
manifestazione del Buddha nel
Guru,
presente
in the
con cui
Buddha.
posso
Buddha.
interagire.
The Guru is the manifestation of the Buddha with whom I can interact in the present. I take refuge in the Dharma, that is the effective path that allows me to gradually transform myself and reach that state. And I take refuge in the Sangha, which is the spiritual company of the others that follow the same path, that help me along the way to follow this path. And that's the moment where we recite Namo Guru Bhye, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. Namo means I pay homage, I rely upon. We visualize Guru Buddha in front of us, and rays of light and nectar come from his 5 chakras to our 5 chakras. But what is the state of consciousness that we should generate? That's where we have somehow abandoned the refuge of what eventually doesn't sustain a state of happiness, and we rely by all means on the Dharma, this profound gradual path of transformation, a path of development of love, wisdom, and we rely upon what guides us and accompanies us along this path. And this has at its basis a trust in ourselves, trust in being able to do it, trust in our own resources, in our own capacity. And so this is the moment where we develop love towards ourselves. This love is translated into cultivating what is good for us and abandoning what is harmful. Because the immediate result of taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma and Sangha is that of practicing the Dharma, that is, when I take refuge in the Dharma is when I put the teachings into practice, and at the basis of the teachings there is recognizing what is harmful and gradually being able to abandon it, and recognizing what is good and being able gradually to cultivate it. And this is what we generate as an awareness, intention, in the moment where we do the part of taking refuge. And this is the first door. It's as if in order to get into this big mandala, there is first a door of entrance, and this is the taking refuge. We still need to overcome the first obstacles, not fully overcome yet. These mountains that initially are an obstacle and that then become a protection. So the first is the obstacle of our own ignorance and this unhealthy selfishness.
Che non è la recitazione ma è l'attitudine
refuge, which is not a recitation but the inner attitude we want by all means to reach a state of peace, so-called nirvana. And this inner state in some contexts is called of renunciation, which is, according to me, a wrong translation, because that gives an idea of sacrifice. And here it's not about sacrifice, actually it's renouncing to suffering and the causes of suffering. But the most correct term and translation would be the definitive emergence, which is the certainty of being able to get out of something, the certainty of being able to emerge, to be able to get out of this. There is the metaphor of being in the ocean of samsara, and we are drowning in the midst of karma and mental defilements, and we're able to get out of that. So that's this trust that I can do it, and I want to reach this state of peace, and I can do it. And so this is the first state that needs to be generated at the beginning, even if that's not something that it's profound and spontaneous at the beginning of the practice. Let's try at least to induce ourselves to that. And if one wants to do it with more time, before taking refuge, it's very good to do a brief meditation on the Four Noble Truths. So one asks himself the question, what is it that I want to avoid by all means? What is suffering? Until one is able to observe, reflect the suffering of body and mind, what appears as pleasurable but that is of the nature of suffering, and is not able to sustain a state of happiness that needs to be avoided anyway, in the sense that I cannot project my happiness on that, and eventually my body and mind polluted by the mental defilements and karma. And as long as there is that, inevitably there is suffering.
Perché soffro?
Why do I suffer?
Non è perché
It's
quella
not
persona ha
because that
detto, non è
person
perché
said
quella
that,
cosa
or
fatta,
because
non è
that
perché
did
manca
that
questo, non è
thing, not
perché
because I like
c'è
this
quella
thing,
situazione
not
che non
because
mi
there is
piace.
that situation that I
Io
don't
sono
like.
sicuro che
And
ognuno
I'm
di
sure
noi
that each one of us
ha
that
una
is
lista
here
di cose che
has a
dice sì,
list
Lama,
of
fai
things
cosa.
that says, yes, Lama, but
Una volta ho letto una
once
frase che
I
mi è
read
piaciuta,
a sentence that I liked,
anche se detta in un
even
modo
if
non
that
molto,
was said in a way that is not
molto
very nice,
educato.
not very well
Era in
educated,
inglese che diceva
polite. It was in English, it said,
all that comes
all that comes,
all that comes before but
all that
is
comes
nothing more
before
than
but
bullshit.
is nothing more than bullshit.
Tutto quello che viene prima del però non è altro che, come si può tradurre? Non letteralmente, non è il caso, nel senso che non passa il significato, ma non è altro che qualcosa di falso, qualcosa di non reale. Quindi quando dico sì, è importante tutti
So
eliminare i
when I
fenomeni
say that it's
mentali, la
important,
cosa,
yes, to
non
eliminate
devo
the mental
proiettare la mia
defilements and I shouldn't
felicità
project my
sulla realtà
happiness on the
esterna, la
external
causa della
reality
sofferenza sono
and
i
the causes
fenomeni
of
mentali e
suffering
quindi
are the mental
però
defilements, but
se quella persona, tutto
if
quello che è
that
venuto prima del
person,
però
everything
non
that
serve a
came
niente.
before the but is just false, it's pointless.
E non è facile dirlo
It's not
senza
easy
però,
to say it without the but,
perché spesso siamo lì
because very
diciamo
often we
sì è
are
vero,
saying,
gli
yes,
elementi
true, the mental
mentali, tutto
defilements
questo, il
and
samsara,
all of
sono
that, samsara,
d'accordo su
I
tutto
agree
questo,
on all
però
of this, but,
dai,
you know,
voglio vedere dinanzi
I
a
would like
questa
to
situazione.
see you in front of this
Guarda che
situation.
se quella
And
persona non
look,
fosse
if that
più così
person
sarebbe
wouldn't
più
be like
facile,
that, it
se io
would
non
be
avessi
more
quel
easy.
problema
If
di
I didn't have
salute
that
sarebbe
problem,
meglio.
it would be much
E
better.
qua cominciamo a fare
And
una
here
lunga
we start
lista,
with a
o
long
piccola che
list
sia,
or
voi siete
short, but anyway,
presente,
it's still
delle
present
cose che se
of the
fossero
things that
diverse
if they were
veramente
different,
saremmo bene.
finally we could be well.
Ma questa è un'enorme
But this
illusione.
is a tremendous illusion.
E c'è un testo un
And
passaggio
there
di un
is a
testo che una
passage of a
volta,
text,
un librettino che ho letto molto
a
bello,
little book
e c'è
that
un
I
passaggio che
read
parla
once,
proprio di
where there is
questo.
a passage
Io
that really talks about this, and I read it to you.
ce l'ho qua, uno dei pochi passaggi che me lo son segnato. È un libro molto bello.
It's a very beautiful book of Martin Buber called the Journey of the
C'è
Man.
un libricino piccolino.
It's a very
Io invito chi può
very
leggerlo,
little
è un
book. I
libro da
invite
leggere, piccolo
who
piccolo,
wants to read it. It's very
molto
nice
bello.
to
C'è
read.
un passaggio che
There is a
dice:
passage that says
bisogna che l'uomo si
there
renda
is the
conto
need that the
innanzitutto lui
man
stesso
realizes first of all that
che le
he
situazioni
himself,
conflittuali
that the
che lo
situations of
oppongono
conflict
agli
that
altri sono
oppose him to the
solo
others are
conseguenze
just a
di
consequence
situazioni
of
conflittuali
conflict,
presenti nella sua anima
situations of conflict present in his soul,
e che quindi
and
deve
that then
sforzarsi
he
di
needs to
superare il proprio
strive
conflitto
to overcome
interiore
one's own
per potersi
inner
così
conflict to
rivolgere
then
ai
be
suoi
able
simili
to
da uomo
relate
trasformato,
to his similar
pacificato e a
as a
lasciare con loro
pacified man
relazioni nuove,
and to
trasformate.
have new, healthy, transformed relationships with them.
Cominciare da se
To
stessi,
start from
ecco
oneself,
l'unica cosa che
that's the
conta.
only thing that counts.
In questo preciso
In this
istante
precise
non mi
moment,
devo occupare
I
di altro
shouldn't
al
take care
mondo
of
che non
anything
sia
else in the
questo
world
inizio.
rather than this beginning.
Ogni altra presa di
Any
posizione mi
other
distoglie da
take of
questo
position
inizio,
takes me away from
intacca
this
la mia
beginning and
risolutezza
attacks
nel
my
mantenerlo e metterlo in
resolution
opera
in
e
putting that
finisce
into
per far
practice
fallire
and,
completamente
and
questa
ends up
audacia e vasta
making me
conquista.
fail
Ossia,
this vast
ogni qualunque altra presa di
journey.
posizione che non sia
So
di
anything else
cominciare da me stesso
rather than
mi
starting
fa
from myself
fallire
makes me fail
audace
in this brave
impresa. Il punto di Archimede, a partire dal quale posso
point
da
of
parte mia
Archimedes, from
sollevare il mondo,
which side
è la
I can
trasformazione di me
lift the
stesso.
world is the transformation
Se
of
invece
myself.
pongo
If
due
on the other
punti di
hand
appoggio,
I have
uno
two
qui nella mia
points,
anima e l'altro là, nell'anima
one
del
in my
mio
soul and
simile
that
in
other in
conflitto
the
con me,
soul of my similar in conflict with
quell'unico
me,
punto sul
then that
quale mi
other
si era
point
aperta
on
una
which I
prospettiva
opened
mi
a new
sfugge
perspective
immediatamente.
slips away from me immediately.
Ossia, sì è
That
vero
is,
che io
yes, it's
ho
true
la
that I
rabbia,
have
questo e
anger,
quell'altro,
this and
però
that,
guarda
but
lui,
look at him.
finito.
That's finished, over.
Perché
Because
sfuggiamo, scappiamo
we run away from our own path. And with this, I don't want to say that the other shouldn't do his own path, but I should face what is in my range of action, that is myself. It's very beautiful what it continues with. You just need to ask this one question. What's the purpose? What's the purpose of going back to myself? What's the purpose of embracing my personal journey? What's the purpose of bringing my being to the unity? And this is the answer, not for myself. And so, even before we were saying to start from oneself, but not ending up with oneself, but to take oneself as a starting point and not as a goal, to get to know oneself, but not to get overly occupied with oneself. This is the point talking about taking this first step. That is, getting out of the position of victimism. Victim of the world, victim of the situations, victim of the old age. Me, what can I do? I welcome myself for what I am and I direct myself towards what I want to be. And here it requires us, demands us, an act that is not of rigidity or like a forceful act, but an act of profound love and compassion towards oneself. And this is the first thing that in the practice is manifested with the taking refuge. And right after that, there is the next part, and Martin Buber really introduced that to what purpose. I start from myself, but it doesn't end with myself. Because let's remember one thing, no one of us is able to love the other in a way that is different from the way that one loves oneself.
We
have such a level of self-referentiality that is terrible. We are really not able to see the other independently from ourselves. And we can give 1,000 examples of this. And so, one of the things that happens, if for me, happiness is to have a lot of money, and I want you to be happy, then what do I want for you? That you can have a lot of money. If for me, happiness is to live in a mountain hut with no electricity, and I love you, I want you to be happy, then what do I want for you? A mountain hut with no electricity. If happiness for me is to look at football, to watch football matches with a lot of fresh beer, then and I love you, then I give you like a subscription to watch football matches and a fridge for beer because I love you. What happens is that when we wish happiness for someone else, we're not able to wish for the other what transcends what we want, first of all. So in the moment that I see that what I want is not like a perfect world, but a state of inner balance and harmony that in its turn can transform the world, then, and I love you, what do I want for you? That you can also live in a state of peace, balance, harmony, that you can overcome your anger, rancor, your attachment, and so on. And that's where, in the practice, we visualize the other beings around us. There are many different ways of doing that, but one of the ways that I like is to visualize my father at my right and my mother at the left, together with them brothers, sisters, wives, husbands, partners, friends, grandparents, family, friends, in other words, those towards which we have attraction. We visualize them on our sides, independently from the fact that they are alive or not. So we still visualize everyone on our sides. And then, behind us, there is like an infinity of beings that are all those towards which we have indifference, so no attraction, no aversion. And in front of us, those towards which we have in a present moment, a particular aversion. And someone could say, sorry Lama, but I have a problem. Okay, the person towards which I have aversion, the category should be on the side. But where do I put that person? So, okay, I put him in front. At the basis, there is like attraction on the sides, behind there is indifference, and in front aversion. And so we visualize that together with them, there are all the others that are connected with them, and there are infinite beings, also like animals, insects, there are like innumerable beings. There is a teaching that usually I don't really put that in practice much, that says that beings should be visualized dirty and sick. Because if we visualize people around us that are all clean, well dressed, happy and content, then it's more difficult to get in touch with their suffering. Because what needs to be done in this moment actually is to observe the other beings and to see how each one of them, with no exception, on the sides, behind and in front, they want to be happy, they don't want to suffer, and each one is in his own cycle of mental defilements, actions, results, is in his own samsara, cycle of suffering. Who is in one way or the other way, who is like in the up moment or in the down moment, but they're all in the same cycle. And so to be able to see the other beings and to say, there is no difference between me and them. There is no difference between who's on the right or the left or in front or in the back. Each one of them wants to be happy, doesn't want to suffer, and does everything that it does guided by ignorance. There is no difference. So first one needs to generate a feeling of equanimity. Equanimity in this case is trying to see that we are in the same situation and to use this as a basis to generate empathy. Because as we said before, we are not able to see the other independently from ourselves. What happens if I go to a doctor because I have a diagnosis of a certain sickness, and then as I'm there waiting, I meet another person that has the same diagnosis? Usually, what is the feeling that I have towards that person? Attraction, aversion, indifference? Or is there a certain empathy that is born? Why do I generate empathy towards that having the same sickness as I do? Because I see myself in the other. It's the wrong term, but we are narcissistic to some extent that... So I have empathy towards you because I see myself in you. The more I'm able to see myself into you, the more I'm able to feel you, the more I'm able to get in touch with you. When I hear that you are from the same city, we are of the same religion, we belong to the same football team or whatever, we have the same sickness, we have the same problems and so on. It's strange to say it, but very often that creates more empathy to have a common enemy rather than having a common friend. So what happens is that when I see that you have similar aspects to me, then I see myself in you and then I have empathy towards you. And this, and the opposite of that is less I see myself into you, the more I create distance from you, and the more I'm also able to accept violence and suffering on you. And this is one of the principles that is at the basis of the systemic violence. When in our social reality and so on, there is a strong systemic violence towards an animal species or a part of a population. The basis, in order to be able to sustain that act of violence, there is an attitude of distance and superiority. I don't see myself in you. Because if I see myself in you, then I'm not able to accept violence on you.
Se noi andassimo,
For example, if we went to like a farm, where they like a farm for animals in quite a violent way, and because like usually when there is a farm of animals, then they live like confined and their emotional needs are not covered and so on. So what if there was like a farm of dogs? How would we live that? Or like a farm of human beings? Why not? Why yes, the farm of cows or pigs and chickens and not of dogs? Because we are more used to living with dogs. We have a particular affection that we have generated towards them. We see ourselves in dogs. There is like a certain contact that we created. When we see an emotion, a characteristic that we believe to be human in the dog, we say, how nice. We see jealous in the dog and we say, how funny, he's jealous. But actually, we are doing nothing else than mirroring ourselves. I see myself in you, so I have attraction towards you. And so, the basis that sustains, the basis for love and compassion is empathy. Empathy comes from seeing myself in the other. Violence is based on the opposite, the lack of empathy. And so, not seeing myself in the other, creating distance from the other. We are different. And we can use as a point for being different, like social aspects or aspects of identity, of nation. For example, like if a person drowns in the sea, according to the nationality of that person, does it change like the level of empathy that we feel? If there is a family that went to have like a trip that really similar to my social and cultural context, that for whatever reason dies in the sea, there is a strong movement. This shouldn't happen, we're really sorry for that. And when many people die that have a different region, they have a different social reality towards which one doesn't have a connection, doesn't see oneself in the other. I wouldn't say that then one wants the other to suffer, but there is indifference because there is no empathy, and at the basis lacks the capacity of seeing oneself in the other, and so we create distance. Is this clear? So the goal that we have in order to overcome this further obstacle of our selfishness, then we need to open our heart to the others, and the basis for opening the heart to the others is empathy. The path is seeing oneself in the other to generate empathy. Empathy brings us to generate sympathy. Sympathy brings us to generate love. Love brings us to compassion, and compassion to altruism, and altruism to bodhicitta. This is the path that should be realized. So first of all, I need to see the other and see myself in the other to generate empathy. When I have empathy, naturally there is a sympathy, like a sort of pleasure of seeing the other, a connection. That sympathy in Tibetan brings to a state of love. I want you to be happy. And that love comes compassion. I don't want you to suffer. I want you to be happy. You're suffering. I don't want you to suffer. That's compassion. From compassion comes the further level, which is altruism, where your happiness and your suffering is as important for me as mine. And I want you, by all means, to be happy and not suffer, and I will do everything that I can so that this can happen. And from this comes the superior level, which is bodhicitta, which is the commitment, the profound, determined commitment of developing oneself as a mean to actually be able to help the others, because I cannot give you food if I don't have food. I cannot help you to overcome, to develop patience if I am getting angry constantly. I cannot help you to get to a state of peace if I don't have that. And so, in the practice, what do is we use the visualization and the recitation as a tool to generate this state. Someone could say, Lama, but already this is already a practice by itself. And actually it is. If we want, we can also just get here and just stay here. We close all the rest, and one can spend a lot of time just meditating on this. That's also very fine. But at the basis of every mandala, there are these two circles of protections, these two obstacles that don't allow us to get in. And the first one is the unhealthy selfishness, and the selfishness itself that needs to be transformed into altruism. And so to do that, first we need to generate equanimity. Equanimity is the tool that allows us to generate empathy. Because we started with seeing ourselves first, seeing that, okay, me, I see my suffering, I see my samsara, and this infinite cycle where I find myself into. It's not really infinite, but apparently it is. But this cycle where I find myself, anger, jealousy, ignorance, selfishness, negative actions, and this constant process of wanting something, not getting it, being in touch with the object of aversion that manifests itself in a constant process of birth, sickness, death, and rebirth, and sickness, death, and it's a cycle that is really difficult. When I'm able to see this cycle in myself, at that point I'm able to see at the others, and I think, okay, well, maybe also the other is in the samsara. Oh, really? You too? You suffer of the same thing that I suffer?
Malattia che andiamo dal medico.
Just a sickness that we go to the doctor is much, much stronger. We suffer the same suffering on a very, very deep level. So when I'm able to see that the other that I have in front, on the side or in the back, is on the same boat, is on the same situation of mine, and then I see myself in the other. That's the basis to begin to develop empathy. So first we visualize all the beings and we see how each one of them wants to be happy and is not satisfied of the happiness that he has, doesn't want to suffer, and continues to live in a cycle of suffering. Does everything that he does, guided by his own ignorance, just as I do, lives inside of this constant cycle of mental defilements, actions, suffering, reactions. It's called samsara. And when I see that the others suffer as I do and they are in the same situation as I do, I start to see myself in the other and to feel closeness. And this loosens that distinction of who's in front, in the side, on the back. Once that I've done that, I get back with my attention towards myself. I get to that feeling of wanting to be happy, not suffer, and I start to expand it towards the others. I like to imagine it, if we have like a lake with the water is totally still, and we let a small pebble fall, it creates like a ripple effect. These waves in circles that expand.
Quindi immaginiamo un qualcosa di questo però che si estende
So imagine that extends not just on the sides but like a sphere in all directions, and we imagine from our heart that feeling of attraction towards happiness and aversion towards suffering expanding like light and including every being, and every being that it touches, it brings like a message. It was as if it was saying to that being, your happiness is as important for me as mine, your suffering is as important for me as mine. I profoundly wish you to be happy and not suffer, and I will do everything that I can so that this can happen. And we allow this feeling to expand without excluding oneself, but including the others. Let's remember that altruism is not an exclusion of oneself to give importance to the other, but altruism is an inclusion of the other, just giving the same importance to ourselves.
Perciò la visualizzazione
And so the visualization helps direct the mind, generate this feeling, and when we have finished expanding this light and generating this feeling of love and compassion towards the others, we go back to ourselves and we see, okay, but me, what can I actually do to help beings to not suffer?
sono molto limitato.
I am very limited, so there is also a sort of feeling of impotency. The only way that I can actually help others is by developing my qualities of wisdom, love, compassion to such a point that I'm able to adapt myself to the effective need of every being.
Quindi io voglio sviluppare
And so I want to develop these qualities to the maximum potential. I need to have presence, awareness, power of action, clairvoyance. I need to have a mind that has an enormous potential of action. It's as if I wanted to eliminate poverty in the world, and then, okay, my €1,000 a month is not enough. So I want to become like an ultra billionaire to be able to use that in favor of who's hungry, for example. I want to develop myself the resources in order to help the others, and the only real resource that we can see to be that through which we can actually help beings to is what is called the state of Buddhahood. And so out of this there is this verse that we recite in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha: I take refuge until enlightenment. And here it refers to the Buddha of the result. So the Buddha that one day I will become, the Dharma that I will realize, the Sangha that I can become, of sustaining to the others, so in one's own potential. In Buddha's Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, it means I commit through the practice of generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom, may I reach the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. When we generate this intention to wanting to develop our qualities to the maximum potential for the welfare of all beings, when we have generated this feeling, we have overcome the barrier of selfishness that represents that circle of Vajras that we can see in this temple here around us. That on one hand is a barrier that we have overcome, and this barrier also becomes a protection, like this love towards oneself and the others is what sustains this path. The specific practice, after having recited this, there is the moment that is called bringing the result in the path, where we visualize an emanation of Guru Buddha coming towards us, enters our head, sits at our heart, our mind, body and speech at a very subtle level become inseparable from the ones of Guru Buddha, and we allow ourselves for an instant to imagine to really be Buddha. I take that experience and I bring it to the present moment. At that point, what do I do if I am Buddha? I help beings. At that point, from my heart, rays of light emanate, going towards all the beings around me. And these rays of light perform the 4 forms of generosity. First, they transform into what beings need materially, so into food for who's hungry, water for the thirsty, medicine for for who's sick, company for who's lonely, heat for who's cold, and so on.
Poi i raggi di luce si
Then the rays of light transform into the help of love to sustain the emotional needs, giving friendship, trust, affection, love to the beings. Then they bring them to a place of security, taking them away from their fears, their insecurities, giving them protection. And then, once that the beings find themselves in a situation where they are materially well, emotionally they are quite balanced, they are in a context where they feel safe, at that point the rays of light transform into the teachings of Dharma and bring them the Four Noble Truths, the three aspects of the path, a path that they can assimilate and develop love towards themselves and towards the others, a correct view of reality, until reaching a state of peace. Once that they have reached a profound state of peace, the rays of light come back and reabsorb at our heart. And as we do this visualization, that's when we do the seven limitless meditations. May all beings have happiness and its causes, be free from suffering and its causes. May all beings be inseparable from the ecstasy, free from pain. May all beings dwell in equanimity, free from attraction towards some and aversion to others. And then the three special dedications that are: may all beings live with a state of health, in a pure environment, and at peace. And so we generate by all means this feeling of love towards the others, and when we finish this moment, it's like, okay, I brought the result in the path. I imagine myself reaching the state of Buddhahood and helping all the beings. Now I get back to the present moment and I say, okay, actually I want this to be true, to be reality, and so that I can by all means reach enlightenment and help all beings, so that every being can get out of suffering. I want to do the practice of self-healing. I want to practice generosity, I want to study Dharma, I want to do anything that is virtuous in this context. I want to do the practice of self-healing as a tool to help myself to reach a state of Buddhahood, to help all beings. That is called generating the correct motivation. Once that I've generated that, this moment of refuge ends, and of the bodhicitta, and so Buddha that is in front of me dissolves into light. This light, I visualize it as a golden light of Buddha Shakyamuni. This light comes towards me, enters my forehead, for each one of us, enters our forehead, fills our central channel, bringing a state of peace, and then that light from the center channel expands throughout the whole body, touching every cell of our body, purifying any negativity, bringing us to a state of well-being and peace. And then that light from our body expands in all directions, getting to every corner of the universe, to every being. And then, as this light expands, it's as if the light becomes stronger and stronger, then everything dissolves into light. The world around us dissolves into light, the beings dissolve into light, we ourselves dissolve into light, and our gross mind dissolves, our emotions dissolve. There is nothing else but this infinite luminous emptiness, which in its term is empty of an intrinsic autonomous existence, inseparable from a state of bliss, and I am this luminous infinite emptiness, inseparable by bliss and free of intrinsic existence. We remain in this feeling, and then from this the universe reappears, we ourselves appear with a body of light, we generate again, and we start the practice of self-healing. Until up to now it was a preliminary practice, So we generate the pure environment. From our heart, rays of light purify this environment. And then we go on making offerings, inviting wisdom beings, making the visualization of the commitment being, inviting the wisdom being, the 7 limbs prayer, and asking the blessings. Then this afternoon we will see the other parts. This first part, this first passage of loving oneself and the others, are we able to see the connection with the practice? And it's very important to remember that when we do Namo Gurubhye, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya,
quello che noi andiamo a
and so on, what we recite in the visualizations that we do act as a support for a state of consciousness that we want to generate, which is love towards ourselves, and empathy, sympathy, love, compassion, altruism, bodhicitta. Now we make our dedications.
Lame kutse rapten chi namkar trinle chokchur gepadang losan tempe dreme sasumgi drove munsel takto ne gyur chi nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shi ninsen takto delekpe kuncho sumki chingi lob kuncho sumki ngodrubut sol Kuncho sumke trashisho. All'alba o al
dawn or dusk, night or midday, may the 3 jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and to sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the 3 jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Oma huntemba lame sangye Rinpoche, kyoba lame tamche Rinpoche, dremba lame gendu Rinpoche, chiamne kuncho sumla chepa. Buon appetito. Volevo ricordare
Good lunch, everyone. I would like to remember to those that are also in the afternoon session that wants to say hi or ask something to come in the afternoon, please, so that then we allow to everyone to eat more or less in the right time.